Welcome to the first episode of Sliding with D&M. My name is Michael.
And I'm Dina McKell.
So this podcast we decided to create came from us coming from two different generations. I'm a 19-year-old college student.
And I'm a 42-year-old Generation X.
We also come from different racial backgrounds. I am a white male.
And I'm a African American female.
So our plan for this podcast is to do two questions, one based off of culture and one based off of global politics or global society, whatever we feel is necessary at the time. So my question for this week is based off of our ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. So I would like to ask Dina what her thoughts are on, specifically in Japan, in their culture, it is very respectful to wear masks when they are sick, out of respect for elders and also their family and friends. And anybody, when they commute, they wear masks when they're sick, just to be respectful and not to spread disease. So, do you think that in the future, maybe 5 or 10 years from now, when hopefully this pandemic is over, that other Western countries such as the US, Canada, the UK will start adopting these policies of wearing masks in times not even in pandemics, but just to limit disease out of respect of elders and friends and family?
I think that this is absolutely a good thing. And here's why. Because I'm always about what is best for the collective, which is something that's kind of lost in Western society, particularly in America. We are typically all about how does it benefit me or what am I going to get out of it? But here, at the end of the day, we're thinking about others and ourselves. And so you have to protect the most vulnerable. And case in point, right now, we're in the middle of a global pandemic. We have been for, which is crazy, seems almost like a year now. And yet we don't have any solutions and we don't have any answers. But I think us wearing a mask, and I know everybody is different across the spectrum on this, and everyone has choices. But I think that we can adopt those principles that if you know that you live in a household with family members that are high risk and sick, um, or you're going to visit family members that are high risk and sick, I think that you should be able to have the option to wear a mask if you so choose. I think it's important that we remember, like I said, at the end of the day, it's about the collective and how we are all working together for a greater good. And that's what we should be doing. So, your thoughts on this, Michael?
I feel similarly. I think that American society as a whole has lost kind of the the insinuation that it's not about the individual person. I think Americans are very self-centered in that thought, where you think about only yourself and your family. And I think we need to start transitioning into thinking about our neighbor and strangers. For instance, when you're on the train commuting to work, I think you need to think about your impact on the person next to you and not just about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and think about like way, way long time ago. Like things were so much different back in the 50s and 60s. It was almost kind of more about being with your neighbor and helping your neighbor and doing those things to kind of help the collective. But we don't do that anymore. And I feel like that shift, I mean, I know I was still young, quote unquote, but I feel like that shift started to happen kind of like in the 80s and in the 90s, especially in the 90s, where it started to be more about like, how can I better myself? What do I get out of this? What is going to benefit me to give me the next leg up or do. And, you can see it so much, kind of that entitlement in our society today. It kind of permeates everything that we do and permeates our culture in general. And it's toxic a little bit. It can become toxic.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. I think entitlement is a good word for it. I think people have become very entitled in what they can or cannot do, and in my personal opinion, I think you see this in America today, where people feel they are entitled not to wear a mask. And you are entitled to have your own opinion on things, but especially when private businesses and public places such as government buildings require a mask, I think you need to uphold those rules that they set. So let me ask you this. You mentioned that the shift from collective to individual started in the 90s. Why do you think that, and where do you think that stems from?
I don't know. I just feel like when I look back at my teenager years in the 90s, like I graduated from high school in 97. I know I'm totally aging
Mhm,
myself right now. But I feel like in the 90s, we started to have that sense of like, it's about me and what can I do to benefit me. Um,
mhm,
and you can see that kind of in a cultural sense kind of change over. I mean, and especially as we got into the 2000s, like you can really see it that things started to change and it was about me. I think the last time that it was about the collective, which it shouldn't be about the collective in times of tragedy, but unfortunately that seems to be something that tends to unify people when you have like a serious tragedy or a serious disaster. I think Americans were really concerned about the collective and whole. The last time was 9/11, right? I
mhm.
mean, and that's
Yeah,
such a sad day and such a sad moment in our country's history. But at that point, nobody was thinking about themselves. They were thinking about what is the good and what is the collective for the country in order for us to move forward and support one another in such a time of tragedy. And since then, we've kind of lost that feeling. I mean, I can remember everywhere you went, you saw yellow ribbons. Everybody was, supporting each other. I mean, I clearly remember that day that it happened. My husband was still working at Home Depot at the time, and I had to go run out and run an errand or something. And my mom was with me, and we went to the store. And some random lady, I don't even know who she was. I mean, was crying. She was literally bawling, and there were people that were
mhm.
huddled around her and comforting her. And we haven't had that full collective in such a long time. And especially now, it's so divisive on should we wear a mask? Should we not wear a mask? It's my right not to. And at the
Yeah.
end of the day, like things aren't going to get better unless we start thinking about everybody and looking at the bigger picture. As long as we have that mentality of it's my right to do what I want. And that is true. It is your right to do what you want. But you invoking your right of doing what you want is hurting the collective. And I think
Mhm.
that's the biggest thing. And by the way, let's just be clear. You really don't, yes, you have rights, but at the end of the day, you really don't have rights to do what you want. There's still laws in place that govern some of the things that you need to do. It's kind of like
Yeah, of
it's an
course.
illusion of freedom. Like, yes, the
Yeah.
Bill of Rights and those things are there, but they're there to protect you, but you really don't have the right to do what you want, because if everybody had the right to do what they want, it would be complete anarchy everywhere, like just mass
See,
chaos.
I think it's interesting because you have freedom of speech in America and you have freedom of the press and freedom of religion, but in all those things, you're only protected until you harm other people. You can't go into the middle of Times Square and scream that there's a bomb about to go off. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure.
You're actively going to harm other people if you do that because you're going to cause stampedes, you're going to cause riots, you're going to cause whatever, right? People are going to get hurt. So I think it's interesting because we're protecting freedom of speech by people claiming that they have the right not to wear a mask. It's their own personal freedom, which it is. But in countries like Canada, where if you choose not to wear a mask or you choose to go out when you're supposed to quarantine, you and you're caught by the government or by police, you will be fined. You are fined $5,000, I believe. If
$5,000? Are you
you
for real?
Yeah, $5,000 if you go out and break quarantine. And I believe the fines go up from there if you test positive with COVID and also if they can prove that you infected somebody with COVID. So I think a lot of other countries are doing a lot more for the pandemic than we are. Um, and those countries also have very liberal free speech and very liberal freedom. But it's interesting because in America, we're protecting freedom of speech over lives at this point.
And I think some of that is that it's so ingrained. Like when think about when you were in school, well, you technically still are in school because you're in college, but when you were taking American government, you talked about the Bill of Rights, and that's like one of those main talking points that you have freedom of speech. But
Hmm.
you really don't have freedom of speech. You do, but you don't. It's like you said, you're protected as long as you don't incur or hurt someone else. But the minute you incur or hurt someone else or incite violence or do something else, then you really don't have that freedom of speech. You have freedom of speech within limits. And so
Yeah.
I think that, I would hope 10 years from now, post COVID and post all of this craziness that we're going through, that countries, especially ours or countries in the Western Hemisphere, do adopt policies that if you so choose, you can wear a mask and not be kind of, it's kind of like when people are body shamed, it's like you're mask shamed. Like, why are you wearing your
Hmm.
mask,
Yeah.
But we have to remember that it's not just about us, it's about the collective. And
Yeah.
this virus is never going to go away unless we change our mindset. And you look at those
Hmm.
countries that defeated the virus early and their cases are still really low or non existent. Those people, those citizens in those countries realize it wasn't about them, it was about the collective. And sometimes you don't get to do what you want, you know?
I mean, look at a perfect example of that is New Zealand.
Hmm.
New Zealand has completely, basically eradicated COVID-19 from their country, and they did that with strict border laws. They immediately stopped travel in and out of New Zealand, and pretty much everybody who was diagnosed with COVID had to quarantine government mandated. They weren't allowed to go out. So I think policies like that from the government definitely do infringe on your freedoms initially, but then at the end of the day, they allow you to get back to the freedoms that you know and love much, much quicker than we would in the state that we're in right now, a year later.
No, I mean you can't deny science and you can't deny facts. And I think this is the other thing too. I mean, thankfully you and I have not been affected by COVID in the sense of we have had it or we have come into close
Hmm.
contact with it. But I don't think people really get the seriousness of it sometimes. You know,
Oh yeah, I
you
mean,
don't know you don't know
you,
what it's like until it happens to you. Do you know what I mean?
yeah,
And even if you know someone close that it has happened to, you still like you try to relate, but you can't really truly relate until you
you get
you
it.
get
Yeah.
it and you see it and you see how it affects your family, it see how you it affects your lifestyle. And so I knock on wood, I'm going to knock now. I am so thankful that our family, as you know, I have two parents that live in our household that are high risk, like extremely high
Hmm.
risk. And I am thankful every day that we have been able to remain safe and because we follow the policies. And I say this all the time to people that I talk to, if everybody would just do their part, literally wash your hands, which I don't understand why we weren't washing our hands before, but okay,
Yeah, in the first place, but
just
it's all
it's all right. It's
right.
all right. It's all right. Wash your hands and wear your mask. We probably would have been out of this more than 6 months ago, you know.
Oh, a long time
And
ago. I
so
mean, when the CDC posted that if everybody would just wear a mask and quarantine if they got COVID for 6 weeks, we would have dramatically really reduced our cases, and that was during the summertime. And here we now, it's now January 10th, and we are at our worst point in COVID cases since this pandemic started, even worse than it was back in April.
so I know it's crazy to think, but just remember, hopefully in our dialogue about this question, everyone will remember that yes, you do have the freedom to choose. No one is taking that away. But at the same time, we have to be about the collective and making sure that overall, all of us are safe and protected. And if it means that maybe for a hot minute, it means I have to do things that I don't want to do, I will do them because at the end of the day, it benefits the collective. So it's like you said, so I can get back to doing the things that I
Hmm.
know and love because I know that I have those freedoms. That was a good
Yeah,
question. Yeah.
out of kindness and respect for other people, I think that's what needs to happen.
Yeah, that was a good question, Michael. That was in
Thank you,
yeah,
thank
thank
you.
you. That was a good one. Man, coming straight out the gate with the fire. Boop, 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 boop.
Straight out the jump. Oh, here she goes with the Jamaican horns,
Jamaican
huh?
horns, we always gotta have those Jamaican horns. Okay, so are you ready for my question? It's about that time
I
to switch
am.
over. Okay, so I kind of teetered on this question because I had an initial question. But I think I'm gonna go for it. I think I'm gonna go for it
Mhm.
and just
All guns blazing,
all
huh?
guns blazing, all full steam ahead. I'm gonna go for it. So obviously, most of you, if you have some type of streaming service or TV or cable or satellite, you saw the events that went down on Wednesday. And so my question is this. I think as an African American woman, um, and by the way, for those of you that don't know me, I am married to a white man, so my children are mixed. But I still consider my children to be African American. I mean, that is what they are. I mean, their hair has those features, their coloring has those features. Although light in color, they are still African American. And we saw a prime display that restraint can and does happen under certain circumstances. And
Mhm,
so my question is that how do we teach that? How do we get to that next level where the restraint that we saw for those protesters, or for those that not even protesters, but those that were attending, I'm going to call it and be gentle, say a rally in honor of President Trump, we saw police exhibit restraint. And how do we justify that when we have seen so many other countless times that they have not exhibited that same restraint in other protests and other rallies and other situations? And how do we change that? How do we change that narrative? So that's kind of my question. I know we're going in hard today, man. We're doing the
yeah.
hard stuff.
Tough
Okay,
questions,
so
tough
lay it on
questions.
me, Michael. Tell me, what's your thoughts?
So, I'm very politically active, as you know. I'm minoring in American political science, and I don't think I ever expected in my lifetime, and I don't think you've ever expected in your lifetime, that a threat as large as what happened on January 6th would basically invade the Capitol. I don't think that I ever expected a foreign or domestic threat to ever have that type of impact on the Capitol. Um, I don't think it comes down to police officers showing restraint. I think it comes down to being underprepared. I don't think that if the National Guard was there and if there was more police presence at the Capitol, I don't think that they would have. I'm going to call them rioters. I'm just going to be honest because that's what they were. It was a riot. It was not a peaceful demonstration. It was a riot. I don't think that these people would have been let go. I think it really comes down to being underprepared as a police presence. And looking back on a lot of the BLM protests, there were peaceful ones, but there were also riots as well. I think that police presence was much more substantial because they expected it. BLM protests were going on for months in advance, and I think that they expected things to get out of hand, which is why they increased police presence. And I think that is why a lot of the people who were involved in the January 6th riots at the Capitol were let go, is because there just wasn't enough police present. There wasn't enough. I mean, you're talking about, I've seen videos where there was three Capitol police officers who were standing at the doors to the Capitol with a mob of close to probably 1,000 people behind them. You know what I mean? Like, you can't expect officers to start arresting people in that sense when there's so many other people behind them. You know what I mean?
I do. But this is the thing though that I don't understand, and maybe you can help me understand this. The thing that I don't understand is that they knew that they were coming. They knew
Hmm.
that they were coming to have a rally, a protest, whatever you want to call it. They knew that there was a large, significant population of people who supported Donald Trump, whether you support him or not even an
Hmm.
issue here in this case, supported him, and they were coming to voice their opinion, which goes back to that freedom of speech conversation that we had. They were coming to voice their opinion on the fact that they felt that the election was rigged, unfair, however you want to call it. So I feel like they knew they were coming. So why were you unprepared? Like you've been prepared for every other type of rally or every other type of protest. You've been prepared. And for this one, and and when I say significant number of people, in my mind a significant number of people is probably 1,000 or more, right? Because
Yeah, yeah,
you
for
can
sure.
have a rally that's 200 people, and that's significant.
Hmm.
But I mean, I'm talking 1,000 or more, which clearly there was 1,000 or more people that were there. You could see that in the videos and the films and the photographs, the stills that were taken that
Yeah.
day. So if you knew that amount of people were coming, why were you not prepared? Especially in the kind of charged environment that we have today.
Hmm.
Like, there should have been no question. You're 2 weeks from a change of power, which is already, let's be real, kind of shaky to begin with. Do you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Between all the lawsuits and this and that, it's already hanging by a fringe of a thread. So, in my mind, that place should be locked, dropped, and stopped. Like, there should be no, like, you should have more than enough security around that place for the next 2.5 to 3 weeks, like Fort Knox. It is locked down. Nobody's getting in, nobody's getting out. Like, and that's so to me, that's concerning that the fact that, like, it was, and not that the Capitol security is loose. I'm sure it's not loose. You know what I mean? But I'm thinking to
Yeah.
myself, one, you have significant amount of people coming. Two, the environment politically is very charged, and there's still people that are not happy with how the results turned out, and there's things and legalities that are going on to try to overturn the election, which you have to follow the due process of law. So
Hmm.
fine, you're going through that. But to me, that's even more of a mind to have more of a presence and be prepared. Like, you should have been prepared. But then I think the thing that was even more disconcerting is the fact that, like, as you're watching this, and you're right, I think some of it is they weren't prepared. They didn't think that, I mean, I didn't think in a million years that people would literally go and storm one of the oldest buildings. Like,
Yeah, I didn't think it would ever get that
who like
bad. I knew,
who does
yeah,
that?
I
Like,
knew
really, like,
something. I Yeah,
who does that? I mean, yes,
yeah,
listen, it is the building of the people. Our taxpayer dollars are paying for the upkeep, and so yes.
yeah, but that doesn't give you the right just because it is the people's building. It doesn't give anybody the right to invade on federal property.
Oh,
It
for
doesn't.
sure.
There's no
For
excuse,
sure.
and
I
I
mean,
believe that those people should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. And they are terrorists. They attack democracy. That's what it comes down to.
they
Um,
went in hard. They were like, no joke. They
yeah.
went in hard. I mean,
So it's not only about invading the Capitol, though. It's about the the symbols of democracy that were desecrated when they went in there. I've seen videos of rioters coming in and just bashing in representatives' office windows and then leaving. They didn't enter the bill, like they didn't enter the office. They just bashed in the outdoor windows and then left. I've seen people stealing, for instance, Nancy Pelosi's plaque or the podium that representatives speak at during session. um, I don't think that any restraint should be shown when prosecuting these people. When it comes down to it, I think race does play an issue here. And I think how the GOP has positioned itself, and those protesters were majority, if not all, GOP participants. I think the GOP has positioned itself as they claim that they're the party of law and order. Um, and to an extent, I would agree. They are the ones who are less likely, I believe, to come out in force. However, these people were they were a very substantial amount of charged emotionally people who decided to try to take democracy into their hands, and it just didn't work out for them. And when we look at the question of race, I think a lot of people left there without handcuffs on or alive because they weren't black. I think if they were black, they would have been, I think the consequences of doing something like that would have been far harsher.
Well, I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that's true. I mean, you look at, the Black Lives Matter protest. I mean, look at those protests. The
Yeah,
majority of those people there are people of color, you know,
yeah,
Hispanic, Asian, black, whatever. The rainbow, literally the rainbow. Yet
yeah.
you see how much more harsh the judgment of exercising their freedom of speech is compared to what happened on Wednesday. And like I said, at the end of the day, like I started with my children, even though I'm married to a white man, my children are black. That's the reality of the situation. No one's going to look at them and be like, oh, you're white.
Hmm.
Never in a million years. They're always going to be, you know, they're going to be black kids. And so it is that juxtaposition of me when, as I have, I mean, one of them is 20, almost 21, so he's old enough to make his own decisions. But even my 16-year-old and my 11-year-old, I have to raise them with the guise of knowing that, like, listen, like, the majority of people that you are around are respectful and kind and care for you. But at the end of the day, you have to remember that when you leave our house, you are black, you know, and sometimes the same courtesies won't be given to you because you are. Um, and so you have to be smart. You have to almost kind of think outside the box and know how to react and how to behave, and not even react. I think react is the wrong word, because when you're reacting to something, it's already happened. So you kind of, I
Yeah,
almost,
not to
not to
react, probably.
not to react, or to
Yeah,
be proactive and know where you are and know what you're doing, so that if you need to react, you can react appropriately. I think that's a big huge part of it. And so as I was watching, watching off and on, and on Wednesday, especially as, you saw the one picture of the guy, he stole the podium. He stole the podium
mhm.
and he literally waved to the people, like waved to the
Yeah,
cameras.
that's the other thing that I don't understand is the blatant amount of information that is out there. I mean, these people stormed the Capitol and were live streaming it. They're taking pictures, they're showing it, posting it on Facebook, posting it on Twitter, whatever, right?
Y-
It's funny because most people, when they commit crimes, they prefer not to have any evidence. But these people decided to show the entire world because they believed they were revolutionaries, right? So it's just funny to me that justice is being served and there is an FBI tip line out if you didn't know, and
Oh, I did not know.
they're being caught. Yeah, the FBI actually posted an anonymous tip line, and apparently they've been getting a lot of tips. So you can actually go on there, and if you know anybody that went and participated in the riots at the Capitol, you can actually rat them out. So the guy who was carrying the podium was actually arrested in Florida, I think earlier today or yesterday. So they are getting caught slowly but surely, but it's just funny to me how there's a blatant amount of information out there on these people.
But I think the things that we saw via video and via, the photo stills and camera pictures that were taken, just also goes back to that whole conversation that we had in the first part of our podcast. Was we talked about that entitlement. And so
Yeah, and
they
it's a little bit of privilege
they
too. It
felt
is. It's a little
entitled.
bit of
They're like,
privilege. Yeah.
well, and we live in such a, I'm going to document this on social media world now so
Yeah.
everybody knows. And so there was that entitlement, like, I'm gonna do this, and I
There won't be
there won't
consequences
be
for it. Yeah.
consequences. But unfortunately, many are finding out right now that there are consequences for those things that happened on Wednesday. And I think my biggest hope is that we can learn from this. Whether you're Democratic, Republican, or you don't believe in anything at all, we move forward and we learn from it so it doesn't happen again, that it becomes a teaching moment, that we teach our kids, right from wrong. We help, you know, governments and police forces learn, say, hey, listen, we can be better than what was displayed on Wednesday, and that.
I hope so too. I hope that we stop being such a politically polarized society and that we can come together for the greater good of the country and actually help each other, right? And move on from this. This shouldn't be happening. It shouldn't be happening in your life. It shouldn't be happening in my life. It shouldn't be happening in my great great grandchild's life, right? We have the oldest democracy for a reason, but it is fragile and it will fall apart if things like this continue to happen. This is stuff that you see in third world countries that are going through revolutions. This is what changes the type of government systems that countries have. And I think it really is sad that we saw it in a country that we all hold so close to heart in our home, right?
Yeah, for sure. No, I think that was, I think we went hard on this one. Like, we went hard on.
You're complimenting
I
yourself.
know. I am complimenting myself because this is, like, these are the tough questions. And I think it's good that we're having these dialogues because your perspective is different than mine sometimes, and mine will be different than yours because we do have about a 20-year age gap between the two of us. But I think it's good to hear because I think sometimes we, as the older generation, and I say that as I'm really not that much older, but I guess I am an
Mhm.
older generation, we write off the things and the knowledge that some of the younger generation actually does have. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
I mean, we all come from different walks of life. We all have different experiences, and I also don't appreciate when people discount somebody's opinion just because they're significantly younger than them or they're a different race or they have a different educational background. I don't think it's fair. You know what I mean? We all have the ability to think for ourselves and we all have the ability to voice our opinions, and it's important to voice your opinion.
well, it is. And that's how you learn, and that's how you grow, and that's how you evolve. I'm a big person saying that this life is about how we evolve in our thinking. And so, yes, my 20-year-old self doesn't think the same way as my 42-year-old self does. But have I
Mm.
evolved? Have I changed my thoughts to be better so then I can make the world better? So then, like you said, my kids and my great grandkids and my great 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 grandkids have a better place to be, years from now when I leave this earth. And I think that's the most important thing when you put things into perspective. Well,
Yeah.
this was
It is. It's all about the collective as we come back around to our initial question. It is about society as a whole. It's not about yourself. And that is perfect for what political strife we're going through right now. It ultimately isn't about yourself. It's about the future. You make policy for the future. And hopefully we can learn from the events of January 6th about it's about the future and not about ourselves.
Well, this was a great conversation for our first episode.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
was. It was a
it
good
was
one.
a good one. It was a good one. So, just so everybody knows the premise. So, this week Michael had cultural and I had global. So, next week we will flip flop. So, I have the cultural question and Michael will have the global question. And we don't really know each other's questions until we meet and talk. So, that's kind of the beauty of this. It's very unscripted, it's very real time. It's what you get when you're listening
Hmm.
to us. And
Whether it's good or not, it is what it
it is
is.
what it is. That's right. So hopefully you enjoyed our first episode, and we hope to be back with you next week with another episode of Sliding with D&M. I'm Dina McKell,
And I'm Michael Petuhoff.
and we'll catch you on the flip side. Until later.